Hello, welcome to the Timekeepers for Life podcast and YouTube channel. I have an amazing guest today. We've already been kind of like chatting a lot, so I wanted to get on here and get Ivette in and catch some of this goodness that she's already throwing down, good points that she's already making. Hey, Ivette.
Good morning, Ebony. Thank you for having me.
No problem. Thank you for coming. And before we jump in, I want you to tell everyone all of the wonderful things, who you are and all of the wonderful things that you are doing.
Okay. Well, to those of you who do not know me, my name is Ivette Palomeque. I am an BS and prepared nurse for 13 years now, a graduate of the University of Texas School of Nursing. So I actually have been in critical care most of the time, ICUs, floats, all that jazz. So critical care is my jam, has always been and probably will always be my specialty for nursing. Recently, probably about 3.5 years ago, right before COVID, I started traveling. I was getting divorced in Florida and I had to be in court literally what seemed like every other week. So I ended up on a travel assignment there so I can just make court dates. That was a rough time in my life, but nonetheless,
Oh my gosh,
we got through it. Yeah, that's another story and another conversation. But so then of course COVID caught me in the wave traveling, and I've been all over the country, Maryland, New York City, ground zero when COVID was first hot in New York, Texas, the border, McAllen, Florida, all these places, Louisiana. So I did travel with my twin sister. So we were two peas in a pod traveling together. Our mission was to take care of our patients and find the best restaurants in the cities.
because the food and drinks are very important.
Yes, that's a form of self-care. I hope y'all know that.
Absolutely.
Nurses, don't feel guilty. That's a form of self-care. Okay. So since then, I actually also went into business and I started Frontline Life Media. So from there, I created a stress management workshop that helps healthcare workers better manage their stress, identify sources of stress and ways to kind of tackle them in more healthier tactics, let's say. Also, I've created a communication skills workshop that helps also healthcare workers just have better communication skills in and out of the workforce setting, because a lot of it is not what we say, it's how we say it and how it comes across. So communications is essential, and we can all use we can all use ways to better communicate with people, right? So my most recent project is a mentorship program that I'm creating for new nurses, because I've identified in all of my assignments how new nurses are being pushed out into the field once their orientation is over. Generally, their orientation gets cut short because of staffing shortages. So now they're left out here with little to no support, which means, guess what? They're leaving the field within 2 years because they can't handle, and rightfully so. It's tough. It's uncertain times wherein nurses' errors are being criminalized more and more every day. It's a battle to protect our license, to protect our health and well-being, to protect ourselves physically from violence from patients, families, other peers. I mean, it's insane. So yeah. I saw a need to create that program to help new nurses manage issues at the bedside and away from the bedside, just to help them become better prepared colleagues and implement skills such as problem solving, critical thinking, stress management, communications, and other things that they need that are not essentially taught at the bedside, but are very much needed for them to thrive in this stressful environment we live in today called nursing.
Oh, yeah. All of that. So
I've also written a book.
Yes, talk about the book. I was going to say you have something else. Don't hold back.
Yes. I have also written a book. You know what? Let me get you a copy of the book so you can see.
Please.
So in my numerous media projects, I've created the best version of you. So this is a book targeting to healthcare workers, and it's called Releasing Stress and Reclaiming Your Cool in Healthcare. Okay, and this goes a little bit into a little detail about my stress management method, the cool method that I came up with to help healthcare workers manage stress on and off the bedside. I've also been an executive contributor for a wellness magazine, and we all know the color of wellness is
Shout out Self Color Wellness and Michelle Rhodes.
Yes, very, very much up and coming, and I'm loving what she's doing, and I'm so happy to be a part of this amazing project. So I've contributed monthly articles to the Color of Wellness magazine project. I've also been let's say, a cast member of a documentary called 2020 Year of the Nurse, which was released in 2021. So I've even made it to film at this point.
Yes, listen, we are here for all of the goodness and to show that being a nurse isn't only a bedside thing. Correct. It is, it really opens so many doors to so many different things. So you don't have to feel stuck, right, where you are. If anything, Ivette said piques you, you will be able to find all of the links and where to find her in our description of this episode. Yes.
And let me just clarify something. Nothing wrong with the bedside. I happen to love the bedside. I love taking care of critically ill patients. The sicker, the better for me. I love it. I don't see anything wrong with working the bedside at all. However, the conditions surrounding what we do at the bedside, it's what's impeding us and won't allow us to be great. So those issues on a higher scale that need to be tackled that, we may or may not be able to control. So what we need to do is our part, be able to recognize some of these things and move around accordingly so that we don't get caught up in the cycle of going to work every day, sitting in your car, anxious, crying, and I've known people to do that. I wasn't one of them, but for many a nights, I did not like my job. So until I left. So understand that there are options. There are things you can do. And being a nurse isn't directly tied to the bedside. If you want to do something else, don't let anybody tell you you're less of a nurse. You're not. Okay? No. You're not.
Thank you. Listen.
I've done other things besides bedside, and I don't want anybody telling me I'm less of a nurse. I'm still a hell of a nurse.
Right. There you go. There you go. And look, that was a great segue into kind of what we were discussing before we started recording that I wanted to jump into now. Because the original thing that I said in the beginning before we started recording was that one of the big reasons why I wanted to officially start this journey on the podcast and in video and interviewing other, Black and brown nurses who are also doing more than just nursing is because I feel like a lot of times, especially nurses, we know how to nurse. we know our job. Right. Anything else, might know you want to start a business, but how to do all of those things, because the business isn't where we, tend to naturally flourish for many of us. And
it's not common knowledge, and it's not taught for sure. So that's knowledge you actually intentionally have to go seek and find and verify that it's correct, because there are a lot of people out here claiming they're teaching and coaching and they're not doing that.
True. And I'm sure we have all seen those types of people. But my question is, so how do you, with all that you have going on, how do you manage to manage your time and your space so that you're able to implement on all of these amazing things you have going on?
Well, again, implementing for me doesn't always look like a strict to-do list, a calendar with like every second of the day planned out. I don't operate that way. And part of the reason I don't operate that way is because as an ICU nurse, you don't own your time at the bedside. Your patient owns your time. And that's the reality of it, that at any given moment, I want to take a bite of my sandwich, boom, my patient codes. I got to put down the sandwich and I got to run, and that's how it is. And so as habit now, I've been doing that for about 13 years. I don't get myself hung up on strict task lists, because the chances are that something's going to go wrong in my day and it's going to deviate from the list. I don't want it to throw off my whole psyche. A lot of people want to be these types of personalities that are so just driven and so, centered on getting the task done. But, I, as a nurse, have had to look at a bigger picture, which I appreciate now in business, because I understand things happen. I understand there's a deadline here and there that may be missed. Not that I'm saying I'm getting in the habit of that, but I'm just saying that, I offer grace as I feel that I would want grace offered to me, because again, I come from a world where I don't own the time. It's whatever the patient does, whatever the vital signs are doing, whatever the pathological condition in the patient's body is doing. That's what owns the time, until we try to get ahead of things and get it under control.
Right.
Then
Right.
I have to roll with punches, which means that my day could have 10 things, and out of 10, I may complete 7, and I have to be okay with that. So on the other hand, when I say I'm doing alone time, that time is respected. My home is where I sleep. That's my sanctuary. I don't allow distractions or BS to come in and disturb that, because I do run on such a mentally tough and tight schedule that sleep has to be sleep time. It's not going to be TV distractions, reality shows, men calling all times of night. It's not that. Absolutely not. So I think that being intentional with the time that you do take for yourself to rest and refuel and recharge your body is a must.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Now I'm glad, because I was going to ask about how do you find pockets of time for your wellness, and you really just laid that out well. And I also wanted to go back to something that you said before, where you talked about how implementation looks different for everyone. And I agree with you that implementation is what it is for you. Right. It is not what your way of implementing might not be, something that I would choose or something that someone else would choose, right. But it is what works for you. And you talked about things such as support, and people, being able to not just agree and validate, when you're sitting in a negative space, people being able to uplift and support you. So talk a little bit about that.
Yes. So when talking about implementation, again, there's these, what do you call, blueprints, right? That people put out, and it says, implement this by this date, and, do this times 6 weeks. That looks great on paper. And that looks great in a world of utopia. We don't live in utopia, and we don't live on paper. So there's that. So implementation could be, I do one task and it takes me 12 weeks versus 6. But the biggest thing is I didn't stop. I didn't quit. I kept going. I stayed consistent. However that consistency pace looks like. It could be just one phone call a day. If that's all you have the mindset and the bandwidth to do, then that's how you start. Of course, at some point, you're going to have to pick up the pace and pick up the rhythm and really, really, go after it a little harder. But in these times and spaces where we are now, where just the whole world is in a really, really bad space, you turn on the news, you just want to shut off the TV, because people are dying, they're killing themselves, they're killing each other. Communities are dying of diseases. They have no access to healthcare. So many things going on that are affecting our ability to implement and our ability to move forward. And as women and women of color, we face triple the amount of obstacles just by being who we are and looking how we look. Doors get closed in our face just because of how we show up. So implementation may not be that 6-week blueprint that you were given by an instructor. It may be that you knocked on twice as many doors and it took you 3 times as long because of the obstacles that we face. And then it means delay. It doesn't mean denial.
That's it.
And we have to know that.
Yeah. Yes. Because that is so true, because many of us, I've been there myself, where I feel like nothing is working. I'm following this person. I'm following that person. And this was before, I really found, a coach that I felt like, truly understood what my journey was, because they had that similar journey and was able to give me actionable steps for me. And if you don't find that, or you don't have that, and like you're saying, if you don't, feel that support, if you don't have that someone telling you like 12 weeks is fine. Nobody said that 6 weeks is superior over the 12 weeks. Would you like to get it done sooner? Of course. But if that's not what you're capable of doing, the imperfect consistency that you were talking about is fine. It's not always going to look good. Like you said, sometimes it might be 1 phone call a day. And sometimes it's going to be like, I just can't do it today.
There are days I've been so discouraged, and I've been living this past month, and I'm like, nothing's working. All the doors are closing. I can't get a contract signed. I can't get this. I can't get that. And it was like the month of I can't. And until, I was in tears some days, to where I can't even pick up the phone and make a phone call. All I want to do is crawl back in bed and go to sleep. But, I understood that my obstacles were different. I understood that I've been here before. I understood struggle. And those moments took me back and said, okay, you've been here before. This is not new. We'll get over it, and the other side will look better. And that's what got me through. So recognizing that, I wasn't alone, because other people that look like me, that I bond with, that I connect with, that are also working on similar projects like me, or in business, or all those things, they've been through struggles too. So it helps to know that you're not alone. And that's why it's important. Your circle matters.
Yeah.
It matters.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And like you said earlier, you don't, I think not that you don't want, I feel like there are different buckets of people for different buckets of things. And especially when you're going through a time like that, where you're already low, and struggling, to have that belief and that faith in yourself, you need other people that will support you, but will also say, girl, get up off your ass,
get up,
and let's go. Right? Like you need that. And that same person can also be like, I understand, you're right, this sucks, it's not fair, all of that stuff. But at the end of the day, none of that stuff matters. What matters is that you get up.
Right. And it's as simple as like really reaching out to the right people, because last week I was really, really down. I had probably one of the worst mental, emotional weeks of my life for a long time. And I was like, nothing's working. So I called up one of my friends in Florida, and I said, look, I'm having a really hard week. Nothing's working. I'm working on 3 different projects. Nothing's monetizing. And she's like, stop right there. And she says, okay, you've been a little stagnant lately, but the money's coming. And she's like, repeat that after me. And I'm like, okay, but she's like, no, I need you to repeat it, because you need to start affirming yourself that you may have been stagnant, and it's okay to acknowledge, but that the money is coming, the success is coming, the contracts are coming. And she says, change your vocabulary. All I heard you say is, I can't, I don't have, I ain't got, da, da, da. And she said, no, change it. And I said, okay. And I did that whole day. I said, okay, I've been stagnant, but the money's coming, the contracts are coming. And literally, I kid you not, the next day, I had a counter offer for a contract.
Mm.
And I said, wow, God, like, y'all can't deny God. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Yeah. And he wants us to, have that expectant faith, right? I don't know if y'all, if whoever's listening, if you're not a God girl, I am. It sounds like Ivette is.
I
And
am too.
so you will definitely hear about God here. But, we have to live in that expectancy of, that things are going to be good. And I think that's awesome that your friend kind of got you out of that negative self-talk space and more into, that positive faith, faithful space where, because that's where we're nourished and we flourish and we are able to like clear our minds and kind of refocus
It
and
is,
and get back on track.
it is insane how that negative self-talk can really propel you into a dark space so quickly. And I see how people just fall off the wagon and like, they just like, they're off the rails in a second, because if I didn't make that call in that space and time, I don't know what kind of week I would have had this week. I don't know where I would have been. I don't know to what extreme I would have been, like, just like, I don't want to do anything anymore. It gets you, like, it really, really takes a stronghold of you. And I mean, it can really drag you to the pits of hell, literally,
Yes.
if you're not careful, which is why early intervention is so necessary. And intervention could be a phone call and say, hey, I'm feeling this way, help me out, something, because if I didn't recognize at that moment in time, I had to talk to somebody. Again, it was not a good space. And I felt it. I mean, even my body, I was like, I feel sick, like ill physically. And there's nothing wrong with me. I went to get lab work done last week. It was perfect. So I know there's nothing wrong with me.
Yeah. And sometimes that awareness, and it's funny because as many times as we've all been through experiences and we've gotten through experiences, when we are faced with obstacles and tough times, sometimes it's like we forget everything. We forget all of the awareness that we had. We forget all of the things that we did to get through it the last time. We forget. And it's almost like you're going through it the first time.
People we've helped through that in the same
that
space.
part. That part.
I'm like, wait a minute. And somebody else had to tell me that. You're the one always uplifting people. I don't like you like this, because this is not even you. You bring the sunshine, you bring, the laughs, everybody, even if people are having a bad day, you walk in the room and it's like, it's not that bad anymore. So to see you like that, it was like, it was too much for people. And they told me, and I was like, oh, wow. So I really need to check myself, because it was really, really outwardly showing.
No, that's awesome. And I think that's in a lot of gems that's been shared today. I think that is probably, one of the greatest ones, is that when you are going through times, and I know people talk a lot about, especially like you said, with the increase of people who feel like they want to self-harm and things like that, it is just so important to just reach out, to just reach out and don't let that feeling of, that doom that we start to feel when we get into those moments that make us want to isolate.
It's just so weird. And so, the whole energy is off.
Yeah. And the sooner the better, I think we like, and like you said, the whole, it's funny how nursing is so similar to business and yet so different, which makes it challenging, but so similar, which also makes it a little bit, easier to understand and wrap your mind around, because interventions in a nursing space, they might be different, but they're still necessary.
Early to get a good
outcome.
They're
still necessary. Yes.
Necessary and early to try to garnish the best outcome.
Yes.
And that's the truth. And in business, it's the same thing. You have to intervene in some sort of way. Your intervention could be your implementation. How that looks to you and at what pace that looks to you, it's up to you. And unfortunately, social media has had a way of putting things out there that, you know, your success is overnight. It's not.
Mm-mm.
You know, everybody's showing, you know, the G-Wagons and the private jets and the this and the that, you know, and people are barely talking about the days where you feel like you don't even know where your next meal is going to come from, because you've literally poured everything and then some into this venture, and it hasn't materialized yet how you want it. It hasn't monetized yet. It's taking you on another path. You have to change your whole pitch. You have to change your structure. I mean, so many things. It's like an
Yeah.
emotional mind F. You know what I mean?
Yeah. It is. It is. And despite all of these things, you can still, you know, get in action, in forward, and move forward and do things. But that's why, you know, before this started, I told you this is, you know, this was just for me like the perfect first like official guest episode for me, because this is really what it's about. This is about, and what I, you know, teach, and I just feel so deeply about, is that you can implement no matter what your circumstance looks like, no matter what you're going through, no matter what happens, no matter what doesn't happen. This is real life. And like you said, real life don't look like the Instagram where, yeah, now I'm private jet and then I have all of these cars and I'm doing that. And
And the
eventually that might
filters
be.
with your
Eventually
perfect
that
body,
might
with your
be.
perfect face.
All right. Eventually that might be, but that is not the journey. And that is not the journey for most of us, even if we, you know, do get to the outcome, even when we get to the outcome. Yeah.
Especially us, because
Yeah.
again, we need to understand that we face a different set of challenges
Yeah.
as women, and then as women of color.
Yes.
So we have to be really, really eyes and ears out, because it's a cold world out here, and the world is not going to be as friendly to us all the time. And doors may not open as quickly for us. That doesn't mean they won't open. It just means we may have to kind of walk around the back door, or walk on the other sidewalk, or something to try to, you know, pass those barriers, because there are going to be barriers, and we're not going to sit here and lie and say we get the same opportunities as everybody else. We don't.
Right. Nope.
We don't.
Nope, we do not. So I want to ask you another question. So in the past 5 years, what thing, what belief, what behavior, what habit, what would you say has most improved your life?
I feel like just knowing that life is too short. Just really, really, and you know, COVID really set that off in a lot of people, especially healthcare workers, because we saw firsthand front lines, you know, how people died, how quickly they died, how like people died like just reaching for somebody or trying to hold a phone saying bye to a family member, things that we will never forget. And it taught me, and it really like pounded in me how short and fragile life can be. So gone are the days of me, you know, stressing out and flipping out over little things. No, not that. That will never be me again. It just won't, because I understand, you know, so many days I left work and I'm like, I just bagged 2 bodies, and I go sit in a restaurant and people are complaining over, you know, their fork looks shinier than the next guy's fork. And it's like, oh my God, you know, and I'm like listening and I'm like, is this really what it's come to? And I just bagged 2 bodies at work because, you know, 2 of my patients died literally back to back behind each other. It's just, that has really hit home for me about how short and fragile life can be. And you don't get do-overs sometimes. You don't get that second chance. You may not even get that chance to even say goodbye. So I think just living in the moment and not being afraid to make your moves, shoot your shot, however that looks like for you. You know, so many people are like, I'm afraid of making the wrong decision. I'm like, the wrong decision is not doing anything at all. How's that?
Yes. 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 And people think like, I can't make a decision, not realizing that you have already made the
You've
decision. When you
already made the
decide
decision
not
not
to
to do
make, yep, when you
nothing.
decide not to do, you have already made a decision, whether you realize it or not.
Right.
It's so true. That's so true. And you mentioned mindfulness. It's still something that I very intentionally work on every day, because I'm a lot more mindful than I ever have been in my life. But by nature, I was not a mindful person. I lived like 5 years in the future. And like you said, I had to start realizing that that tomorrow not promised, let alone next 5 years. Like, you cannot live, that far ahead and just skirt through your day like you are entitled to so many other days after it. And that, so you saying that really hit home for me, because that's how I used to operate. That I operated in that unmindful space, and it affected how I was able to do things, because I wasn't operating in real time. I was so hung up on future results and future things that it almost, it stagnated me, from being able to do anything, because you tend to, waste time. They say when you live in the past or in the future, you're really wasting a lot of time. And
Yeah.
it's so
Yeah.
true. So that was, I felt that.
That time is not on our side, and agreed. So many of us get hung up on things that we want to achieve, the next goal, what's the next hurdle, the next house that we want, the next car, the next, mate, all these little like check off boxes for our life, not realizing that just the ability to wake up, walk around, breathe, fresh air is a privilege here.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's really brought it back home for me. Like, you know what? Again, I made it through another day.
Yeah.
So many people
Yeah.
did. And
Yeah.
seeing that firsthand now, that just really, really shook me. And I think now even I watch where I go places just because people are so intolerant.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I mean, people act like we just didn't have 1 million people die.
Mm-hmm.
And they could care less.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so
It has
sad.
been eye-opening for me too. Just this morning, I was dropping my son off for school and I was coming home. I had in the past, probably the past year, I've been really good with, I'm horrible at like accepting things for what they are. I'm good with change. But if it's something that I want, and it's something that, that I feel like, I want to have, and all of those things, I struggle with acceptance. And what I realized was a huge breakthrough moment for me, which I tend to have them at random times in the shower is where I get most of them, honestly. But when I was coming home earlier, I realized that there were some dreams, if you will, they say, you can't put a time on when you hope to achieve, and, all of this stuff, which I agree with. But no one ever really talks about what to do with those dreams that haven't happened. Like, say you did, because I shouldn't say, oh, I want to do this by the time I'm 30. That's probably not the right, expectancy to have. And that's probably not the most healthiest for myself. However, I had that dream. And what I realized this morning is that I can accept that some of the personal dreams that I had are not going to happen by the time I wanted them to. They're not, either because they haven't yet, or I just feel like they won't, and I'm releasing that. But that I can grieve that loss of that dream, and I can dream a new dream. Right. And it was such a realization to me earlier. It was almost like I'd never thought about that before. Like, would you could dream a new dream? Never honestly really even entered my mind realistically that, yeah, you can put that down. You can put that down.
Yeah. Especially the ones
and
with
be okay with
standards.
Yes. You can be okay with it and dream another dream. Go on to implement something new. And because honestly, that for a long time, that held me back from implementing, is because I was so hung up on what I felt like I wanted. Like you said, what this standard what this standard was. And it's funny that you mentioned that word. My therapist challenged me last month to start creating new standards for myself that I come up with. Because for so long I was living by standards of things that I heard or how I grew up. And they weren't working for me. And it took me so long to, once it sounded good, like, oh yeah, I can do one, in a month. And it took me damn near a month to do that one, because when I really started to dig in and think about what it was very hard to articulate and to understand for myself. And I was just like, it's some things that seem so basic and probably come to some others a little more naturally than a lot of us. But it was just such a breakthrough moment for me to just like release that and give myself the permission to just dream a new dream and create standards that I want, that I decide on, and that are intentional and meaningful to me, and not care about who else is saying that this should be it.
Right. Because honestly, if we did live and continue to live by society standards, I mean, we would have all been married by 25. We would have all had 2 kids by 30. We would have all probably been, either stay-at-home wives or whatever that standard looked like for us. And that's so not the case. And again, as women of color, we have different dynamics to deal with. So society standards versus our realities are here and there.
Mm-hmm.
And acknowledging that is the first step to breaking all of those barriers in your thought process and in how you implement your life. Because again, it's your life to live. And you can either get hung up on everybody else's theory on how you should live your life and just kind of pass your time and then get to be 70 years old and in a hospital bed saying, I regret I didn't do this. I regret I didn't do that. I decided a long time ago, I didn't want to be that person. So I kind of broke away from those molds. I knew I wasn't going to be 25 and married. I knew I wasn't going to be 30 and married, 35 and not married. I already knew that. Eventually I did get married briefly and I divorced. So there's that. Been there, done that. I'm not hung up on life goals, because by 25, I was still struggling to finish my first degree because of things that happened out of my control with families and illness and things. And you know what? I had to let all that go then, because I was in such a state of crisis that my MO was only to survive. Who the hell cares that I wasn't married by 25? I'm trying to stay alive.
Right. Yeah.
And when you've been through things like that, that really, really can cause sheer trauma and panic in your young life. I think that kind of stuff molded me a little different, younger. So I grew into an adult, more carefree, which was great for me, more carefree, more understanding, more tolerant, just, kind of living life on my terms.
Yeah.
And it certainly freed me up a lot emotionally, mentally, psychologically. I didn't care what anybody else thought, because you know what? Nobody's feeding me. Nobody's giving me a roof over their head. I have to figure life out solo, which means my standards are mine. And that's just it. And if I'm okay with sleeping on an air mattress, in a studio apartment, then that's just what it is. Until I get it. Because nobody out here handed me a book, a manual, a check, nothing. So that's just what it is. So I've created it for myself and I'm happy with the results. I'm not where I want to be, but I'm working on it.
Yeah. And this is it's a never ending journey. Like this journey won't, it won't really, it'll take on different phases and have different roads and paths, but it will always be something that we do. So I love that you said that. And I have one last question for you. What is the best way you get yourself into action and able to implement? If you had to, or you can name the top 2 or 3, whatever, but what works for you when you ultimately you need to accomplish something? What do you do to say, okay, let's go?
For me, it's usually a form of reassurance with, again, my network of people who are supporters, who are cheerleaders, who are uplifters, who are go-getters. And they kind of, hey, reel me back in. Because, I'm kind of like a lone star out here. So it's, I'm first generation US born. My family's Colombian. It's just the siblings here in the US. We don't have any really extended family or any of all of that to rely on. So it's always been just us, and we're all kind of spread out across the US. We're lone stars. So literally our entire adult lives, we've relied on our peer relationships, close friends, coworkers or things, because that's been our circles. So it looks a little different for me. I don't run home anywhere for Sunday dinners. There's nowhere to run home to, so it looks a little different for me. So when I say, my peers in my circle, it's because that's a big part of my life, simply because of my dynamics of how I grew up and where I am as, as a first US born in a family tree. It looks very different. So my circle is usually people that get me going, because it's hard for me with the self-talk. It helps a little, but like the circle, hearing it and seeing others implement and seeing them move ahead is like, oh, okay, they're doing it, I can do it too. They're rooting for me, they're here for me. And it's a very, very healthy, benign relationship. So that's important. Relationships are everything.
Yes.
Especially with business.
Yes. And that's great. I love that. And I'm glad that I asked you that, because like you said, it's not the most traditional thing, but how many of us really have the traditional thing? I know I don't have, I lost my mother in 2006. She was 50, and I was never cool with my dad, but he passed away maybe a year or two ago now. But so like, there are times when I'm like, when things happen with my son, and it's like, I don't have no grandparent. I don't have no parent to say, oh, you're doing good. You know what I mean? Well, I'm proud of you. That does fall to other people in your life. Not that you need the validation, but certainly it's amazing, and it feels good to hear, from someone else who cares about you, that, that you're doing well, and that you're doing, a good job. And so I think that, that's important for people to see that looks different also. Like this whole process, it looks different.
Right. Yeah. I mean, because traditionally, maybe, some people's parents, put in capital for their business venture, put in support, they're answering phones for them. We get none of that. None of that. On the contrary, I take care of my mom. I send her money. I take care of her bills. So again, it's a different dynamic that I'm dealing with. On top of managing my household, I have to manage hers, and again, things look different. So when things really start feeling like they're crashing, I have to hurry up and intervene, because it's not just me. It's my mom. It's a wave of people that depend on me, that, I'm supporting, that I'm doing this. And I've been a source of support for a lot of people for different reasons, not monetarily, but for different reasons. And sometimes it gets heavy. It gets heavy. So that's why I know I have to intervene very quickly and not let myself sink so far, because otherwise it can be catastrophic.
Yeah. And hence why you wrote that book, and you do what you do for nurses, particularly frontline nurses, because those are, a lot of the things that nurses in that situation come across. So tell people where they can find you, where they can find your book. And I will also link your information, get that from you, and link it in the description boxes. But tell people where they can find you.
Okay, so the book can be found on Amazon, actually. So the best version of you. All right. And they can find my website at frontlinelife.co. And you can email me at hello@frontlinelife.co, or you can call me at 713-300-8950. Instagram, Frontline Life Media. Facebook, Frontline Life Media. See the pattern?
Frontline Media, y'all. Life Media, Frontline Life
Frontline Life
Media.
Media. Yeah. Yeah,
All
literally
right.
in the middle of Frontline Life. Like that was born literally as I was living the actual Frontline Life. So
Awesome. Well, y'all go check it out. Like I said, I will make it easy for you. I will get all the links, email, phone number. We will get all the goods. I will get all the goods from Ivette. Ivette, thank you so much for coming on and being my first guest. This was so good. I appreciate it.
Honored, and I appreciate you. And I hope that whoever's listening can get a lot out of this, and, you know, feel free to connect. We're here for you. This is community. You know, this is not just a one-time thing. We're literally aiming to build a community because we understand the level of support that our nurses need. So we are happy. Come join us, talk with us, chat, whatever.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Later.
Bye.